I died on a Tuesday. The rain was pouring when that truck hit me. No one saw who did it. No justice, no suspects. Just gone. My fiancée Ava cried for exactly 7 days. On day 8, she changed her Instagram. By day 9, she was having dinner with Jason, her ex, who would always have a special place in her heart. 3 weeks after my funeral, they announced their engagement. She wore my grandmother's ring. They told everyone I was unstable, that I had disappeared in the weeks before my death, that maybe I walked into traffic on purpose. My family was too broken to fight back, but karma rewrote the rules. I woke up 6 months before my death, very much alive and very, very aware. This time, I won't be the tragic footnote in their love story. This time, revenge will be served cold. I woke up, gasping, my heart pounding against my ribs as if trying to escape. The familiar ceiling of our bedroom came into focus, moonlight casting gentle shadows across the walls. Beside me, Ava slept peacefully, her breathing soft and rhythmic. I stared at her beautiful face, the face of the woman who would marry another man the day after my funeral. How was this possible? I remembered everything. The rainy Tuesday, the truck appearing from nowhere, the impact, then darkness. And after that, somehow, I had watched from beyond as Ava mourned me for exactly 7 days before changing her Instagram bio and reconnecting with her ex-boyfriend, Jason. I had witnessed their engagement announcement 3 weeks after I was buried. I had seen her wearing my grandmother's ring in their photos. Now I was back, 6 months before that deadly Tuesday. 6 months to understand what happened and prevent my own murder. 6 months to discover why the woman I loved enough to die didn't love me enough to grieve properly. I slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake her. My hands trembled as I checked my phone. The date confirmed it. Exactly 6 months before my death. This wasn't a dream or delusion. Somehow, impossibly, I had been given a second chance. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. I looked the same. Dark eyes, closely cropped hair, the small scar above my right eyebrow from a childhood accident. But inside, I was someone else now. Someone who knew the future. Someone betrayed. My immediate instinct was to confront Ava, to demand answers about a crime she hadn't yet committed. Instead, I took a deep breath. If I was going to understand what happened, what would happen, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to watch and wait. That morning, I pretended everything was normal. I kissed Ava goodbye as she left for her PR job, smiling as she reminded me about dinner with friends that evening. Once alone, I began my investigation. Our apartment's smart home system had been my pet project, controlling lights, temperature, and security. Now I added new features: keystroke monitoring on our shared laptop, backup recording of our security cameras, and a program that would forward her text messages to a private server. If she and Jason were already plotting, I would find evidence. For the next week, I maintained the illusion of normalcy while gathering data. I discovered their first recent contact had occurred 3 months earlier, an innocent-seeming message when Jason's finance firm announced a merger. That had led to coffee to catch up, then lunches that Ava never mentioned to me. Their messages were careful at first, then increasingly intimate. I found photos she had sent him, nothing explicit, but private moments meant only for someone you're close to. I found late-night calls when I was traveling for business, and finally I found the first mention of what-if scenarios about my absence. At a charity gala the following weekend, I met Jason for the first time in this new timeline. He was exactly as I remembered: tall, blonde, perfect teeth, Harvard charm, and old money confidence. He greeted me with practiced warmth, complimenting the success of my tech startup while his eyes calculated my worth. "Noah, finally we meet," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Ava talks about you constantly." I smiled, matching his pressure. "Funny, she rarely mentions you." A brief flash of Something, annoyance, concern, crossed his features before his smile returned. Well, ancient history and all that, though in our world everyone stays connected somehow. I watched them throughout the evening, noting how Ava's body language changed in his presence. The slight turn toward him in group conversations, the laugh that was a pitch higher than usual, the brief touches that seemed accidental, but never were. That night I asked casual questions about Jason on our way home. Ava's answers were measured, downplaying their history while emphasizing his current importance in our social circle. His family practically owns half the venture capital firms in the city, she explained. Having him interested in your work could be huge for us. Us. As if her reconnection with her ex was for my benefit. I nodded, playing the ambitious entrepreneur, grateful for any advantageous connection. Over the next month, I expanded my surveillance while accelerating my company's development. If my death had been about accessing my technology patents and life insurance, I needed to understand exactly what made me valuable enough to kill. The breakthrough came when I installed additional monitoring on Ava's personal devices. A separate messaging app revealed conversations explicitly discussing their relationship and future plans that included accessing my intellectual property after what they called the transition. My hands shook as I read their exchange. Jason, how long after the transition before we can move forward with the patents? Ava, my lawyer says if it looks accidental, insurance pays immediately. We wait a reasonable mourning period for appearances, then announce our reconnection as finding comfort in shared grief. Jason, and the tech is worth what you believe? Ava, his latest project alone is valued at 8 figures. He thinks I don't understand what he's building, but I've seen everything. With your connections and my access, we'll multiply that tenfold. I closed the laptop, ice spreading through my veins. This wasn't just opportunistic betrayal after an unexpected death. They were planning my accident. The hit and run was no random tragedy. It was murder. Rather than confronting them, I accelerated my counter-strategy. I created digital backups of all evidence, storing them with trusted associates. I began subtly restructuring my assets and creating documentation of my technology that excluded Ava from intellectual property rights. Through it all, I maintained the facade of our relationship. I still kissed her goodbye each morning, still listened to her stories about work, still made love to her, memorizing every contour of her body while imagining her with him. 2 months before my scheduled death, I recreated my original proposal. I took her to the same beachfront restaurant, knelt on the same spot, and offered her my grandmother's ring, the ring she would later wear to their engagement photo shoot. Yes, she cried, tears streaming down her face. Yes, of course I'll marry you. As we celebrated with champagne, I watched her send a quick text under the table, thinking I wouldn't notice. Through my monitoring system, I received a copy instantly. To Jason, he proposed. The plan is still on. I smiled, raising my glass. To my beautiful, treacherous fiancé. To our future, I said. To our future, she echoed, her eyes shining with tears I now understood were not for me. In that moment, watching her lie so effortlessly, something hardened inside me. This was no longer about prevention or understanding. This was about justice, about consequences. I would not just survive their plot. I would make them regret ever conceiving it. I began restructuring my assets the day after our engagement. With the ring on her finger, Ava became less cautious, making my work easier. I created 3 shell companies based in different countries, each appearing to be interested in various aspects of my technology. Through these entities, I gradually transferred funds from accounts Ava knew about to ones she didn't. My technology was more valuable than even Ava and Jason realized. What they thought was just an advanced encryption algorithm was actually the foundation for an entirely new approach to secure digital transactions, something that could revolutionize everything from banking to medical records. The patents alone would be worth billions once fully developed. I arranged meetings with Visionary Capital, Jason's chief competitors in the venture capital world. Their CEO, Eleanor Winters, had a personal vendetta against Jason's family after they orchestrated a hostile takeover of her father's company years earlier. "Your technology is impressive, Mr. Sinclair," she said during our first meeting, her sharp eyes evaluating me. "But I sense there's more to this sudden interest in partnership than just business." I decided calculated honesty was my best approach. "Let's just say I've discovered my fiancée and her ex-boyfriend have unhealthy interests in my intellectual property. Interests that might involve my permanent removal from the equation." Eleanor didn't even blink. "I see. And you're looking for protection as well as investment." "I'm looking for allies who understand that revenge and profit aren't mutually exclusive goals." She smiled then, a predator recognizing a kindred spirit. "I believe we can work together, Mr. Sinclair. Let me introduce you to our security team as well as our lawyers." With Visionary's resources backing me, I established a secure research facility where my real work continued under pseudonyms. The technology I showed Ava and discussed at home was deliberately flawed, advanced enough to appear valuable but with critical components missing or incorrectly implemented. If they stole it, they'd find themselves with worthless patents and angry investors. Meanwhile, I needed to identify the hitman they'd hired. Through the monitoring systems I'd installed, I discovered Jason had made several calls to a burner phone registered to a shell company I traced to his college roommate, Derek Langley. Public records showed Derek had served time for assault and had connections to organized crime in 3 states. Rather than confronting Derek directly, I anonymously fed information to law enforcement about his other criminal activities. I wanted him under surveillance when the time came, but not arrested yet. He was my proof of their murder plot. My next step was finding an ally closer to home. I remembered how Ava's friendship with Mia Chen had mysteriously ended shortly before we met. At the time, Ava had brushed it off as growing apart, but now I suspected there was more to the story. I arranged a seemingly accidental meeting with Mia at a coffee shop she frequented. She recognized me immediately, her expression guarded. "You're Ava's fiancé," she said, not a question. "That depends on your definition of fiancé," I replied. "Is it still valid if she's planning your murder with her ex-boyfriend?" Mia didn't look surprised, which told me everything. "I tried to warn you, you know, at the Hendersons' party last year." Ava interrupted before I could say anything. "I remember. I thought you were going to tell me she didn't like her engagement ring." "I was going to tell you she did the same thing to her previous boyfriend. Got engaged, then suddenly he had a boating accident. Insurance paid out, but not enough to interest Jason back then. You're worth much more." We spent the next 2 hours talking. Mia had distanced herself when she realized what Ava was capable of, unwilling to be complicit but afraid to come forward without proof. Now she had found someone who believed her. "My family has connections in venture capital," she mentioned as we were leaving. "If you need additional resources or introductions, I can help." "I might take you up on that," I said, surprised by how genuine her offer felt. In my previous life, I'd never gotten to know Mia. Now I wondered what else I had missed while blinded by Ava's manufactured perfection. As we parted ways, she touched my arm. "Be careful, Noah. They're more dangerous than you know." I nodded, but internally I smiled. They had no idea how dangerous I had become. The next phase involved understanding exactly how they planned to access my patents after my death. Through Ava's emails, I discovered Jason had already engaged a patent attorney to challenge ownership based on collaborative development. They were planning to claim Jason had contributed to my research, making him a co-inventor with rights to the technology. I countered by documenting every step of my development process with time-stamped records, witness statements from my engineering team, and blockchain verification of all research notes. I also planted misinformation in the files Ava could access, creating fatal flaws in any attempt to replicate or extend my work without my direct involvement. 3 months before my scheduled accident, I discovered Ava had begun leaking confidential business plans to Jason. My latest investor presentation, financial projections, and client list had all been forwarded to him with notes about vulnerabilities and exploitation opportunities. Instead of confronting her, I used this channel to feed them carefully crafted misinformation. I created projection models showing potential regulatory problems that didn't exist. I emphasized technological challenges we'd already quietly solved. I introduced phantom investors who would supposedly block any attempt at hostile takeover. Every night, I'd watch Ava sleeping beside me, her face peaceful, beautiful, and completely foreign to me now. Sometimes I'd wonder if any of it had ever been real, her love, our connection, the future we'd planned. Other times I'd remember specific moments. Her laughter during our trip to Jamaica, her tears when I surprised her with concert tickets, her passion when we made love. Had it all been calculation? Performance? Or had something genuine transformed into betrayal? It didn't matter now. Whatever we'd been, we were enemies now. She just didn't know it yet. 1 month before the planned hit and run, I identified the exact location they'd chosen for my accident, a blind curve on my regular running route, poorly covered by security cameras, with limited witnesses at the time I typically ran. I changed my routine, taking different paths at different times, always with my phone's location services disabled. I didn't want them to realize I was on to them. I also began building my alibi for that specific day. I arranged an international investor meeting that would place me thousands of miles from the accident site. Only I would actually attend remotely, from a secure location where I could monitor everything while appearing to be overseas. 2 weeks before the planned accident, I finalized my arrangements with Visionary Capital. My new company would emerge immediately, after my death, with patents already filed under my new identity. Eleanor had arranged everything from legal protection to physical security. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" she asked during our final planning session. "We could have them arrested now with the evidence you've gathered." "Justice isn't just about punishment," I replied. "It's about consequences. I want them to experience the complete collapse of everything they've built. I want them to know exactly why it's happening." She nodded, understanding perfectly. "Then we're ready whenever you are." As the day approached, I felt strangely calm. In my previous life, I'd been ambushed, unaware, a victim. Now I was the architect of what was coming. I was no longer the man who died on a rainy Tuesday. I was something new, something forged in betrayal and reborn with purpose. And soon, very soon, Ava and Jason would understand exactly what they had created. The morning of my scheduled death arrived with perfect irony. Sunshine instead of rain. Weather forecasts had predicted storms, another detail Ava and Jason had factored into their plan for reduced visibility and fewer witnesses. I watched Ava, getting dressed, applying her makeup with practiced precision, completely unaware that today's script had been rewritten. "You're staring," she said, smiling at me through the mirror. "Shouldn't you be getting ready for your run?" I smiled back, matching her performance with my own. "Just admiring the view. Think I'll skip the run today. That investor from Singapore wants a pre-meeting before the actual meeting." A flicker of something, concern, annoyance, crossed her face before she masked it. "But you never skip your Tuesday run. It's part of your routine." "Sometimes routines need breaking," I replied, watching her carefully. "Besides, I've got a feeling about today. Better to stay in, stay safe." She turned, her expression softly concerned. "What do you mean, stay safe?" I shrugged. "Just a strange dream. Probably nothing." She walked over and kissed me, her hands framing my face with practiced tenderness. "Don't worry so much, everything's going to be fine." The irony was exquisite. If she only knew how true that statement was, for me at least. After she left for work, I activated the final phase of my plan. I sent a secure message to Eleanor confirming our timeline, then placed tracking devices on both Ava and Jason's vehicles. Through my monitoring system, I watched Jason take a call from Derek Langley, confirming details for what they called the delivery. I had already anonymously tipped off law enforcement about a suspicious vehicle potentially involved in drug trafficking. Derek's truck that would be at the exact location of my planned accident. 2 plainclothes officers were now stationed nearby, waiting. At precisely 6:42 p.m., when I would normally be rounding the blind curve on my run, I watched through hacked traffic cameras as Derek Langley parked his truck in position. The police approached him almost immediately, finding both the vehicle modifications for a deliberate hit-and-run and a significant amount of illegal substances in his possession. Derek never saw the inside of a courtroom. Facing multiple felony charges and third-strike sentencing, he took a plea deal that included naming his employers. Jason's expensive lawyers managed to suppress this temporarily, but the investigation had begun. Meanwhile, I was supposedly in Singapore attending my investor meeting. In reality, I was in a secure apartment across town, using advanced video conferencing technology to appear present in the Asian boardroom. When news broke about a foiled potential attack at the location where I normally ran, I made appropriately shocked comments to my colleagues about the dangerous neighborhood. From my surveillance, I watched Ava receive a panicked call from Jason. Their conversation was guarded but clear enough. "The delivery failed," Jason said. "Driver got pulled over before the package arrived." "What about the recipient?" Ava asked, her voice steady despite the crisis. "Never showed up. Changed plans at the last minute. We need to regroup. This changes everything." I smiled as I ended the investor call. They had no idea how completely everything had already changed. For the next week, I maintained my normal routine while watching their frantic attempts to salvage their plan. Jason liquidated certain investments, preparing resources for a quick exit if necessary. Ava became more attentive than she'd been in months, suggesting a weekend getaway to relax after your stressful meeting. I agreed to the trip, a remote cabin by a lake, conveniently isolated from witnesses. Through my surveillance, I discovered they had pivoted to a new plan: staged drowning accident during our romantic retreat. Jason would be nearby, ready to comfort the grieving fiancé after the tragic loss. The Friday before our planned trip, I met with Mia to finalize our counter-movement. "Are you sure about this next step?" she asked. "Once you're dead, there's no going back to your old life." "My old life ended the moment I discovered their plan," I replied. "I'm not losing anything real." She studied me for a moment. "You've changed since we met, Noah. There's a coldness now." "Not coldness, clarity." That night, I replaced Ava's phone with an identical model containing modified GPS that would show us traveling to the cabin even though I had other plans. I packed her overnight bag with a sedative in her evening wine. Whatever scenario they had planned for the lake would never happen. When Saturday morning arrived, we began our drive as planned. 30 minutes in, Ava received a text, Jason confirming his position near our destination. An hour later, I pulled into a roadside diner. "I'm starving," I explained. "Let's grab an early lunch." Over club sandwiches, I watched her check her phone repeatedly, growing increasingly anxious as our timeline deviated from their plan. When she excused herself to the restroom, I slipped the sedative into her coffee. 20 minutes later, as we returned to the highway, she began to drift off, blaming exhaustion from her busy week. Within another 10 minutes, she was completely unconscious. I drove to a private airfield where Eleanor's corporate jet waited. Mia met us there with a medical team who transferred the sleeping Ava to a secure medical facility where she would remain sedated for 48 hours under the guise of treating her for an allergic reaction discovered during routine pre-vacation blood work. Meanwhile, I boarded the plane alone, leaving her phone in the car that would be driven to the cabin by one of Eleanor's security team. The phone's GPS would show our arrival, brief movement around the property, and then a sudden stop at the lake's edge. The car would be left with signs of my presence but not hers, setting up the narrative that I had gone to the cabin alone after Ava suddenly couldn't make the trip. From the air, I watched the pieces of my false death fall into place. The local sheriff, responding to an anonymous call, would find evidence of a lone swimmer at the lake. My wallet and shoes would be discovered on the dock. Drag operations would find nothing because there was nothing to find. By Sunday evening, the narrative was established. Noah Sinclair had drowned in a tragic swimming accident. With no body recovered despite extensive searching, I would be declared missing and presumed dead. The life insurance wouldn't pay immediately without a body, but Ava and Jason didn't know that part of their plan had been compromised. When Ava woke on Monday in the private medical suite, confused and disoriented, she was informed by sympathetic doctors that she had suffered a severe allergic reaction requiring emergency treatment. While she was unconscious, her fiancé had apparently gone to their cabin alone and met with tragedy. The doctors encouraged her to rest before dealing with the devastating news. I watched through security cameras as she processed this information. The calculation behind her grief was fascinating, determining exactly how much shock to show, how many questions to ask, how quickly to contact Jason without appearing suspicious. Within hours, she had transformed into the perfect grieving fiancé. By Monday evening, she was giving a tearful interview to local news, pleading for expanded search efforts to find her beloved Noah. By Tuesday morning, she had established a social media memorial page dedicated to my life and accomplishments. I observed it all from my secured location, documenting every performance, every calculated tear. Jason maintained a respectful distance publicly while providing private support, the devoted friend helping the grieving fiancé through unimaginable loss. Exactly 7 days after my disappearance, just as I had witnessed in my previous life, Ava changed her Instagram bio. The grief narrative began its subtle shift toward resilience and healing. Jason appeared more frequently in her posts, first as a supportive friend, then as something more. I allowed them 3 weeks of growing confidence, of believing their plan had succeeded through fortunate coincidence rather than their original design. I watched them begin the process of claiming my assets, Ava filing initial paperwork for my life insurance while Jason prepared to challenge my patent ownership. Then, on the day they announced their engagement, the day she wore my grandmother's ring in their photo shoot, I triggered the final collapse of their world. It was time for the dead to return. The annual Tech Fusion conference was the perfect stage for resurrection. Every major player in the industry would be present, along with financial press and social media influencers. Jason had secured a speaking slot, planning to announce a new venture built on intellectual property he would claim was collaborative work between us before my tragic accident. Ava would be in the audience, the supportive new fiancé of a rising tech visionary. They had no idea I had been working with the conference organizers for weeks. I arrived early, entering through a private entrance with Eleanor and Mia. Conference security, briefed on the situation, ensured I remained unseen until the perfect moment. From a backstage monitor, I watched Jason take the stage, confident and polished in an expensive suit. "Today I want to honor a visionary who left us too soon," he began, a practiced, somber expression on his face. Noah Sinclair was not just my fiancé's former partner, but a collaborator whose ideas have shaped the future of secure digital transactions. The audacity was breathtaking. On the screen behind him appeared patent diagrams I had created, now subtly modified with his name added as co-inventor. In Noah's memory, I'm announcing the launch of secure chain technologies, built on our shared vision and dedicated to his legacy. That was my cue. I nodded to the stage manager who dimmed the lights. Jason paused, confused by the unplanned interruption. The screen behind him switched to a video feed of me, sitting in a chair, very much alive. "Hello, Jason," my recorded self said calmly. "I believe you're attempting to launch my company without me." The audience gasped. Jason froze, his face draining of color as he turned toward the screen. Before he could recover, the side doors opened and I walked out onto the stage, live and in person. The reaction was immediate chaos. Cameras flashed, people stood. Security moved toward Jason, who looked like he might collapse. In the front row, Ava sat rigid with shock, her hand covering her mouth, my grandmother's ring gleaming on her finger. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphone, my voice echoing through the stunned silence that followed the initial uproar. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but when someone tries to steal your life's work after attempting to arrange your death, a certain flair seems appropriate." Security had reached Jason now, discreetly restraining him as I continued. "For those confused by my apparent resurrection, let me clarify. I never drowned. I never died. I simply stepped aside temporarily to observe what certain people would do when they thought I was gone. I looked directly at Ava. It was quite educational. The next part had been carefully choreographed with law enforcement. As I spoke, officers entered from the back of the hall, moving purposefully toward Ava and the stage where Jason stood. I have evidence, I continued, that my disappearance was not meant to be an accident, but rather a deliberate attempt on my life, orchestrated by the man currently attempting to claim my work as his own, and by the woman who accepted his proposal 3 weeks after my supposed death. On the screen behind me appeared text messages, bank transfers, and recordings documenting their conspiracy. The audience watched in stunned silence as their plot unfolded in irrefutable detail. This evidence has been provided to the appropriate authorities, I added as the officers reached Jason and Ava, and I believe they have some questions. The arrest was handled discreetly, with minimal disruption to the conference. As Jason and Ava were escorted out, I returned to my presentation. Now to the actual technology that inspired such desperate measures. I'm pleased to introduce Quantum Ledger Protocol, developed by my new company, Phoenix Secure Systems. For the next 30 minutes, I delivered the presentation of my life, introducing technology far more advanced than what Jason had attempted to steal. The audience, still reeling from the drama, leaned into the substance of my work with almost desperate focus. By the end, I had secured verbal commitments from 5 major investors and partnership inquiries from 3 Fortune 500 companies. As the conference continued, the news of my return and Jason and Ava's arrest exploded across media platforms. Their public images crumbled in real time as my evidence became public. Jason's family company stock plummeted 43% by closing bell, triggering emergency board meetings and frantic damage control. At the hotel afterward, Eleanor raised a glass in our private suite. To the most profitable revenge I've ever witnessed. Mia joined the toast, her eyes meeting mine with understanding. That went beyond business. In the weeks of planning, our professional collaboration had evolved into something more personal. She had seen me at my most strategic and my most vulnerable, and had chosen to remain. It's not over yet, I reminded them, though I accepted the champagne. This was just the public revelation. The legal battle comes next. Their lawyers will fight desperately, Eleanor agreed. But they can't overcome evidence this comprehensive. Jason's family might attempt to distance themselves by sacrificing him. She was right. Within hours, the Hale family released a statement expressing shock at their son's actions and pledging full cooperation with authorities. Their lawyers were already negotiating terms that would protect the family business at Jason's expense. Ava had no such protection. Her carefully cultivated image as the grieving fiancé turned resilient survivor, transformed overnight into that of a calculating gold digger, implicated in attempted murder. Former friends and colleagues distanced themselves publicly. Journalists dug into her past, uncovering patterns of similar relationships with successful men who subsequently experienced misfortune. I monitored the fallout from our suite, watching justice unfold across multiple screens. Part of me had expected to feel triumph, vindication, or at least satisfaction. Instead, I felt strangely hollow. The betrayal that had consumed me for months was now public knowledge, but the exposure hadn't healed the wound. It had only confirmed its existence. Mia noticed my silence. "Second thoughts?" she asked quietly after Eleanor had left to handle business calls. "No," I replied. "Just realizing that revenge doesn't actually change what happened. It doesn't erase the fact that someone I trusted completely was capable of this." She moved closer, her presence comforting without demanding. "It wasn't about you, Noah. Some people just see others as tools for their advancement. You could have been anyone with the right resources." "That's actually worse," I said, realizing the truth of it. If it had been personal hatred at least, that would mean I mattered as a person. She took my hand, her grasp warm and solid. "You matter, just not to them." That night, as the media storm continued to build, I made one final move. I released selected portions of my surveillance to trusted journalists. Footage showing Ava and Jason celebrating at what would have been my memorial service, laughing about how perfectly their plan had worked, toasting to new beginnings, while surrounded by framed photos of me. The public reaction was immediate and merciless. Any remaining sympathy for them evaporated overnight. Jason's family abandoned any pretense of supporting him, focusing entirely on corporate survival. Ava's social media accounts were flooded with vitriol until she deleted them entirely. Their legal strategy collapsed under the weight of public evidence. Jason's lawyer approached with a plea deal request that would require full testimony against Ava in exchange for reduced charges. Her lawyer countered with a similar offer, creating a race to betray each other first. Meanwhile, Phoenix Secure Systems officially launched with record-breaking initial investment. My technology, freed from their attempted theft, was recognized as revolutionary. Industry leaders who had once courted Jason now approached me directly, eager to distance themselves from the scandal by associating with its victim. At our first official board meeting, with Eleanor as chairperson and Mia as chief strategy officer, we outlined our 5-year growth plan. The company valuation had already exceeded what my previous venture had been worth, with projections suggesting we would multiply that tenfold within 18 months. Your reappearance is the tech story of the year, Eleanor noted as we reviewed media coverage. Every interview request imaginable is coming in. How do you want to handle your public narrative? I considered the question carefully. Minimal personal details. Focus on the technology and its applications. I want to be known for innovation, not victimhood. She nodded approval. Smart. Let the work speak while the scandal burns itself. Out. As we concluded the meeting, my phone alerted me to breaking news. Jason's family had formally disowned him, cutting off legal support and financial resources. Simultaneously, evidence of his embezzlement from family accounts had mysteriously surfaced, adding financial crimes to his legal troubles. I showed the report to Mia as we left the boardroom. "You're doing?" I asked. She smiled enigmatically. "Information wants to be free. Especially information about people who try to murder my boyfriend." Boyfriend. The term felt strange but right. In the midst of destruction and rebirth, something genuine had grown between us. Something built on truth rather than calculation. That evening, as we had dinner in my new penthouse overlooking the city, I realized I was truly living rather than just executing a revenge strategy. My death had freed me from the person I had been. My resurrection had created someone stronger, more aware, more authentic. The next phase of justice would unfold in courtrooms and boardrooms, but I was no longer defined by it. I had transcended victimhood. I had become something neither Ava nor Jason had ever anticipated. I had become unstoppable. 3 months after my resurrection at the tech conference, Phoenix Secure Systems had become the industry's rising star. Our technology was revolutionizing digital security across multiple sectors, and our stock had tripled since the initial public offering. I had moved from victim to visionary in the public narrative, rarely discussing the scandal that had launched my new beginning. Jason and Ava's legal troubles had deepened with each passing week. Their betrayal of each other had been swift and complete, each offering evidence against the other in exchange for leniency. The prosecution had happily collected their mutual incriminations while pursuing maximum charges against both. I was in a board meeting when the news alert came through. Jason had been attacked outside his attorney's office. Initial reports suggested a random mugging gone wrong, but security footage later revealed a targeted assault. 3 masked assailants had been waiting specifically for him, using the cover of night and the building's blind spots to avoid clear identification. Jason had been beaten severely, suffering multiple trauma injuries including a devastating blow to the head. He was in critical condition at Metropolitan Hospital, unconscious and unresponsive. The neurosurgeons offered little hope for recovery, describing extensive brain damage that exceeded their treatment capabilities. I felt nothing when I read the news. Not satisfaction, not pity, not even surprise. It seemed an inevitable consequence of the life he had chosen, the enemies he had made, the protection he had lost. Whether the attack came from business rivals, prison connections, or someone else he had wronged, the result was the same. Jason Hale was effectively gone even if his body remained. I continued with my day, focusing on our upcoming product launch and partnership announcements. That evening, Mia and I hosted a dinner for international investors, cementing relationships that would expand our global footprint. It was nearly midnight when we returned to our apartment, tired but satisfied with our progress. The doorman stopped me as we entered the lobby. "Mr. Sinclair, there's someone who's been waiting to see you. I told her you don't take unscheduled visitors, but she's been here for hours and refuses to leave." Mia and I exchanged glances. "Who is it?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "A Ms. Monroe. Says she knows you personally." Ava, out on bail pending trial, her assets frozen, her reputation destroyed. And now with Jason's condition, truly alone. "Should I have security remove her?" the doorman asked. I considered it momentarily. "No. Where is she?" "In the reception area, sir." "I'll speak with her." Mia squeezed my hand. "Are you sure that's wise?" "It's necessary," I replied. "Whatever she wants, I need to hear it." Ava barely resembled the woman I had once loved. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simple jeans and a plain sweater. Her perfectly maintained hair hung limp around a face stripped of professional makeup. Dark circles shadowed eyes that had lost their confidence. She stood when she saw me, her body tensing as if preparing for rejection. When she noticed Mia beside me, something like pain crossed her features before she masked it. "Noah," she said, her voice hoarse. "Thank you for seeing me." "You have 5 minutes," I replied, coldly. "Use them wisely." She nodded, accepting my terms. "You've heard about Jason?" "Yes." "The doctors say he needs a specialized procedure, something experimental involving neural regeneration. Only one surgeon in the country is qualified to perform." I knew where this was going. My college roommate, David Chen, had pioneered the technique she was describing. We had maintained our friendship over the years, with David becoming one of the world's leading neurosurgeons while I built my tech empire. "Dr. Chen at University Medical," I said flatly. Hope flickered in her eyes. "Yes. They said there's a 6-month waiting list, but Jason doesn't have that long. The swelling is increasing. They give him days, maybe a week. And you want me to call David and ask for special treatment for the man who tried to have me killed?" She flinched at the bluntness but didn't deny it. "I know how it sounds. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. But I'm desperate." "Clearly." Tears filled her eyes, but I remained unmoved. I had seen her cry on command too many times to trust the display now. "Noah, I made a terrible mistake. I was confused and weak. Jason manipulated me, made me believe things that weren't true. I never stopped loving you." The lie was so expected it was almost disappointing. "Is that what you told the prosecutors when you offered evidence against him? That you were manipulated, confused, that the plan to kill me and steal my technology was all his idea?" She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "I've done horrible things, unforgivable things. I'm not asking for forgiveness or understanding. I'm just asking for mercy for Jason." "Why? So you can reunite when he recovers? Plan your next scheme together?" "No," she whispered. "It's over between us. It was over before the attack. He blamed me for everything falling apart, said I ruined his life." I laughed coldly. "You both ruined your own lives. You made choices, Ava. Deliberate, calculated choices." "I know," she admitted, real emotion finally breaking through her practiced control. "And I'll pay for those choices for the rest of my life. I'll go to prison. I'll never work in this industry again. I've lost everything. But Jason doesn't deserve to die like this. Doesn't he? You both planned my death without hesitation. You celebrated at my memorial service. You wore my grandmother's ring to your engagement photos with him. Tell me, what exactly doesn't he deserve?" She had no answer for that. We stood in silence for a moment, the reality of her situation settling between us. "Please," she finally said, her voice breaking. "If there's any part of you that remembers what we had, what we meant to each other, help him, not for me, not even for him, for the person you used to be. It was a masterful attempt at manipulation, I had to acknowledge that. Appealing to my better nature, suggesting that refusing would somehow diminish me. The old Noah might have been swayed by such emotional leverage. The man I had become saw right through it. The person I used to be died when you betrayed him, I said quietly. You and Jason killed him as surely as if your original plan had succeeded. The man I am now has no obligation to either of you. Noah, she whispered, tears streaming freely now. I'm begging you. I'll do anything you ask. Anything at all. Anything? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Would you confess to everything, take full responsibility for the murder plot, accept a maximum sentence while exonerating Jason completely? Hope flickered in her eyes. Yes, if that's what you want. Yes, I'll sign whatever confession you draft. I'll say whatever you want me to say. I studied her for a moment. Even now, facing complete ruin, she was calculating, bargaining, looking for leverage. It was almost admirable in its relentlessness. The truth is, Ava, I could help Jason if I wanted to. One call to David and he'd be in surgery tomorrow, but I'm not going to make that call. Please, she tried again, reaching for my hand. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. You chose him over me when I was alive, I said, the words precise and final. Now you can watch him die while I live. That seems like poetic justice to me. Her face crumpled as the last hope died. You were the only man who ever really loved me, she whispered. I looked her directly in the eyes. Exactly. I turned and walked away, Mia's hand in mine, leaving Ava Monroe standing alone in the reception area of the building that bore my company's name. Security would escort her out. She would return to her emptied apartment, to her looming trial, to the wreckage of the life she had gambled and lost. Later that night, as Mia slept beside me, I thought about Ava's visit. I could have made the call to David, could have arranged the surgery that might have saved Jason. Part of me had even considered it, wondering if mercy might provide closure that revenge had not. But as I'd told Ava, the man capable of that mercy no longer existed. She and Jason had killed him. What remained was someone harder, clearer, unwilling to extend second chances to those who had proved themselves unworthy. I picked up my phone, scrolling to David's contact information. For a moment, my finger hovered over the call button. Then I set the phone down and turned away. Some choices, once made, established patterns that couldn't be broken. Some betrayals changed the future permanently. Jason Hale would face the consequences of his actions without my intervention. Ava Monroe would face hers, and I would continue building the life they had inadvertently made possible when they tried to end my first. 1. Sometimes justice needed no further action. Sometimes it simply required allowing natural consequences to unfold. 6 months after my resurrection, 1 year from the day I awakened in the past with foreknowledge of my murder, Phoenix Secure Systems had become the dominant force in digital security. Our technology had revolutionized everything from banking transactions to medical record protection, with government contracts and international partnerships cementing our position as industry leaders. Jason Hale had died 3 days after Ava's desperate visit to my building. His funeral was sparsely attended, his family maintaining minimal public connection to preserve what remained of their company's reputation. Their stock had stabilized, at 40% below its previous value, forcing restructuring and the sale of key assets to competitors. Mia and I had built not just a successful company, but a genuine relationship. Her intelligence, loyalty, and emotional honesty had shown me what real partnership looked like. We had moved into a home together outside the city, creating a sanctuary away from the constant demands of our professional lives. I was reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant notified me of a breaking news story. Ava Monroe had given an exclusive interview to global media, supposedly telling her side of the scandal that had captivated the technology world. I watched the segment with Mia that evening, curious what narrative Ava had constructed to salvage her reputation The interview had been carefully staged to present her as a victim rather than conspirator. She wore simple clothes, minimal makeup, and spoke in a voice modulated to convey emotional trauma. "I was caught between powerful men," she explained to the sympathetic interviewer. "Noah was brilliant but controlling. Jason represented freedom from that control. I made terrible mistakes in how I handled the situation, but I never planned violence against anyone." Mia snorted in disbelief. Is she seriously trying to rewrite history when there are recorded conversations of her planning your murder? I shrugged, unsurprised by Ava's tactics. Some people never stop performing, even when the audience knows it's an act. The interviewer challenged Ava gently about the evidence against her. Multiple recordings show explicit discussions of planning Mr. Sinclair's death. How do you explain those? Ava had clearly prepared for this question. Those conversations were taken completely out of context. Jason was obsessed with Noah as a business rival. He would talk in these hypothetical scenarios that I never took seriously. I should have reported him, but I was afraid. Noah had been growing increasingly erratic, and I felt trapped between them. Erratic, I repeated, shaking my head at the audacity. Apparently, discovering your fiancé is plotting your murder counts as erratic behavior. As the interview continued, Ava portrayed herself as a woman manipulated by Jason's charm and Noah's supposed instability. She claimed she had been seeking a way out of her engagement when Noah's apparent drowning occurred, leaving her confused and vulnerable to Jason's influence. "I regret every day that I turned to Jason after Noah's disappearance," she said, a perfectly timed tear sliding down her cheek. I was in shock, not thinking clearly. By the time I realized my mistake, I was already implicated in something I never wanted. The narrative was clever in its construction, designed to create doubt without directly contradicting the most damning evidence. It might have worked if I hadn't anticipated this exact move. "Time for the countermeasure," I said to Mia, reaching for my phone. With a single text message, I activated the protocol we had established months earlier for this scenario. Within minutes, selected media outlets began receiving comprehensive evidence packages containing material not previously released to the public. The first was security footage from my memorial service, showing Ava and Jason laughing together, in a private moment when they thought no one was watching. Their conversation, captured with perfect clarity by directional microphones I had installed, was damning. "God, I thought this day would never end," Ava had said, removing the somber expression she'd worn throughout the service. "How many more sad stories about Noah do I have to pretend to care about?" Jason had laughed, pouring champagne into crystal flutes. "Just until the insurance pays out, baby. Then we never have to hear his name again except when we're counting our money. To freedom," she had toasted, clinking her glass against his, "and to getting exactly what we deserve." The irony of that toast was not lost on viewers as the footage went viral across social media platforms. The second release was even more devastating. Ava's recorded conversation with me during her desperate visit after Jason's attack. Her admission that she would take full responsibility for the murder plot in exchange for saving Jason contradicted everything she claimed in her interview. By morning, her attempted reputation rehabilitation had collapsed completely. Global media issued a statement distancing themselves from her narrative and apologizing for insufficient verification of her claims. Her attorney withdrew from her case, citing irreconcilable differences regarding case strategy. The prosecutor's office released a brief statement indicating they were reviewing additional evidence that might result in enhanced charges. Ava's bail conditions were tightened, her minimal remaining assets frozen for potential victim restitution. I watched the fallout with detached interest, no longer emotionally invested in her destruction. Justice had its own momentum now, requiring no further action from me. My focus remained on building rather than breaking. Phoenix Secure Systems had launched a non-profit division developing privacy protection for vulnerable populations, domestic violence survivors, witnesses in high-risk cases, political dissidents in authoritarian regimes. The technology that Jason and Ava had coveted enough to plan murder was now being used to protect people from others like them. One evening, as Mia and I hosted a fundraiser for this initiative, Eleanor approached with an update on Ava's situation. She tried to sell her story as a book, Eleanor informed us. Publishers passed after seeing the new evidence. Now she's facing complete financial collapse on top of everything else. Any remaining connection to her family? I asked, more curious than concerned. None. They publicly disowned her after the security footage release. She's completely isolated. Mia studied my expression. Does that satisfy you? She asked when Eleanor had moved on to greet other guests. I considered the question seriously. It's not about satisfaction. It never really was. It was about consequences, about balance. Later that night, after our guests had departed, we sat on the terrace, overlooking the city lights. The company we had built together glowed in the distance, our tower a beacon of innovation and second chances. I received an interesting offer today, Mia mentioned, curled beside me on the outdoor sofa. The University Medical Center wants to establish a research division focusing on neurological trauma treatments. They're looking for founding donors. I understood immediately. The same medical center where David Chen practiced. The same experimental procedure that might have saved Jason. They believed they could develop treatments for cases previously considered hopeless, she continued. Make the techniques more accessible, less dependent on a single surgeon's expertise. I nodded, seeing the symmetry. People like Jason might have options beyond one specialist with a 6-month waiting list. Exactly. It would help thousands of patients annually. Let's do it, I decided, but anonymously. This isn't about reputation. She smiled, understanding perfectly. It's about balance. The following weekend, we visited my family for the first time since my resurrection. My parents had been devastated by my apparent death, then overwhelmed by my return. The public scandal had further complicated their emotional recovery, making our reunions careful, healing affairs. My mother pulled me aside during dinner preparation. I saw that woman's interview, she said quietly. The things she claimed about you. You know none of it was true, I assured her. Of course I know. But it still hurts to hear lies about my son. She studied my face. Are you truly beyond it now? Have you found peace? I considered her question honestly. I've found something better than peace. I've found purpose and clarity. She nodded, satisfied with my answer, in a way only mothers can be. Good. That's what matters. That night, as news broke of Ava's final humiliation, being photographed leaving a pawn shop where she had attempted to sell the engagement ring she had kept as a trophy, I felt nothing. No triumph, no pity, no connection whatsoever. She had become a stranger, relevant only as a cautionary tale. In our bedroom, I found Mia reviewing plans for the neurological research center we would fund. Her dedication to building something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal mirrored my own evolution. We had transformed damage into opportunity, pain into progress. You know what I realized today? I said as I joined her in bed. Everything they did ultimately made me stronger. Their betrayal forced me to become someone I might never have discovered otherwise. She set aside her tablet, turning to face me. Do you think they understand that? That in trying to destroy you, they created something indestructible? I doubt it. People like them never truly understand consequences. They only experience them. Outside, the city continued its rhythm, indifferent to personal dramas yet shaped by their outcomes. Somewhere in that sprawl of lights, Ava faced her empty future alone, stripped of everything she had valued, status, wealth, admiration, connection. Not because I had demanded vengeance, but because her own actions had created inevitable consequences. And somewhere in that same city, the foundation was being laid for a medical breakthrough that would save thousands of lives, funded by the company that existed, because two people had planned a murder that never happened. I could have saved Jason. I could have destroyed Ava more completely. I had chosen neither extreme, instead allowing natural justice to unfold while focusing my energy on creation rather than destruction. In the end, that was the most complete victory. Not just surviving their betrayal, but transcending it. Not just punishing their attempt to erase me, but building something they could never touch or claim. They had married on the day they thought I died. Now I lived in a reality they could never have imagined, while they had reaped exactly what they had sown. Justice, after all, required no embellishment. It simply needed room to exist.